The year was 1995, and the summer sun beat down relentlessly on the small, close-knit town of Willow Creek, nestled deep within the rolling hills of rural Pennsylvania. For the Miller family, it was a summer of carefree joy, filled with the usual symphony of cicadas, distant lawnmowers, and the almost constant, effervescent laughter of their twin daughters, Sarah and Emily, identical in every way. From their sun-kissed blonde hair to the mischievous twinkle in their blue eyes, they were inseparable, a single unit of youthful energy that brought warmth and light to every corner of their humble home. The scent of honeysuckle from the porch swing mingled with the faint aroma of freshly cut grass, forever etched in their parents' memories as the backdrop to their last moments of shared bliss. Mary Beth Miller, their mother, often recalled that last morning vividly, a memory she would replay 1,000,000 times in the silent years that followed, searching for a sign she might have missed. Sarah and Emily, then just 10 years old, had been buzzing with excitement. A local carnival had just set up shop on the outskirts of town, promising dizzying rides and sugary treats. Their pleas, a chorus of please, Mom, please, had been irresistible, their faces alight with an innocent hope that seemed to defy the very concept of sorrow. Thomas Miller, their father, a man of few words but deep affection, had been busy with chores in the barn, the rhythmic clang of tools echoing through the morning air. He remembered pausing, wiping sweat from his brow, to watch them from a distance as they skipped across the yard, their bright summer dresses a blur of color against the green. He'd waved, a simple gesture, unaware it would become a poignant farewell, a moment frozen in time, forever stained with the ache of absence. The twins had been given strict instructions: stay together, be back before dark, and under no circumstances were they to venture beyond the carnival grounds. Be careful, my little fireflies, Mary Beth had called out, a playful nickname for her energetic girls, her heart swelling with the usual blend of love and apprehension that mothers feel. She watched them walk away, hand in hand, down the dusty country road, their silhouettes shrinking against the vast summer sky, a scene that would haunt her dreams for decades to come. As dusk began to paint the western sky with hues of orange and purple, a gentle anxiety began to creep into the Miller home. The sounds of the carnival, once a comforting hum in the distance, now seemed to mock them with their continued revelry. Thomas had stepped onto the porch, his eyes scanning the horizon, a knot forming in his stomach. They should be home by now, he murmured, the words heavy with unspoken fear. Mary Beth, her hands trembling as she tidied the already immaculate kitchen, felt a cold dread begin to coil in her stomach. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself the girls had simply lost track of time, perhaps mesmerized by a new game or a thrilling ride. But the silence in the house, once filled with their chatter, now felt oppressive, amplifying every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the tree line, plunging Willow Creek into a deepening twilight, the Millers' apprehension morphed into outright panic. Thomas got in his old pickup truck, its engine sputtering to life, and drove to the carnival, his headlights cutting through the growing darkness like desperate beams of hope. The carnival was still bustling, a cacophony of music, laughter, and the worry of rides, but his daughters were nowhere to be seen. He searched frantically, his voice hoarse as he called their names, pushing through the crowds, his heart pounding with a frantic rhythm. Carnival workers, their faces grim, shook their heads, offering no comfort. The laughter of the other children seemed to mock his growing despair, the sweet smell of popcorn and cotton candy turning acrid in his throat. Returning home, his face ashen, Thomas found Mary Beth on the porch swing, rocking back and forth, her eyes wide with terror. The unspoken truth hung heavy in the air between them, a chilling premonition that stole their breath. The twins were not just late, they were gone. The first call to the local sheriff's office was met with reassurances. Give it a little more time, Mr. Miller. Kids sometimes wander off. But as the hours stretched into an agonizing eternity, and the moon climbed high in the night sky, casting long, eerie shadows across Willow Creek, the reality set in. Sarah and Emily Miller had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the haunting echo of their laughter and an unbearable silence that would forever consume their parents' lives. The mystery had just begun. The morning after the disappearance dawned with a heavy, oppressive fog that seemed to mirror the despair settling over Willow Creek. The news, carried by whispers and then shouted by local radio, spread like wildfire through the small community. People emerged from their homes, their faces etched with concern, a collective gasp of disbelief rippling through the quiet streets. The usual hustle and bustle of a summer morning were replaced by an eerie stillness, broken only by the chirping of crickets and the occasional distant wail of a siren, a sound that now filled the Millers with both dread and a flicker of desperate hope. Sheriff Brody, a seasoned lawman with a weathered face and a reputation for quiet determination, arrived at the Miller residence shortly after sunrise. He found Mary Beth huddled on the sofa, a blanket wrapped tightly around her, her eyes red and swollen from a night of relentless tears. Thomas sat beside her, his shoulders slumped, clutching a faded photograph of his daughters, their smiling faces a cruel reminder of what had been lost. The scent of stale coffee and unwashed dishes hung in the air, a testament to the family's shattered routine. The initial search was swift and expansive, involving every available officer from the county and a legion of concerned volunteers. They scoured the carnival grounds, painstakingly sifting through discarded tickets and trampled grass, searching for any scrap of evidence, any hint of where the girls might have gone. The vibrant, chaotic energy of the previous night had been replaced by a somber, methodical hunt, the silence punctuated only by the crunch of boots on gravel and the hushed commands of the search coordinators. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers from surrounding towns joined the effort, forming search parties that fanned out into the surrounding woods, their voices echoing through the trees as they called out Sarah, Emily. The sun climbed higher, beating down on them with an unyielding intensity, but the heat was forgotten in the shared urgency of their quest. The rustle of leaves underfoot, the snapping of twigs, every sound was scrutinized, every shadow explored, but yielded nothing. Days bled into a week, and the hopeful energy of the initial search began to wane, replaced by a grim resignation. Posters with the twins' smiling faces, once plastered optimistically on every lamppost and storefront, now seemed to gaze out with an almost mournful plea. The vibrant blues of their eyes, so full of life, now seemed to hold a silent question that no one could answer. The town's collective hope was slowly, painfully, evaporating like morning dew. The Miller home became a focal point of the investigation, a place where leads, however flimsy, were discussed and discarded. Sheriff Brody set up a temporary command center in their living room, the once cozy space now dominated by maps, diagrams, and a constant flow of grim-faced officers. The scent of their daughter's favorite strawberry shampoo still lingered faintly in their shared bedroom, a cruel sensory memory that tormented Mary Beth. Investigators interviewed everyone remotely connected to the carnival, from the ride operators, with their weary eyes, to the candy floss vendors with their perpetually sticky fingers. No one recalled anything out of the ordinary, no suspicious vehicles, no unfamiliar faces. It was as if Sarah and Emily had simply dissolved into the humid summer air, leaving behind no footprints, no echoes. The media, initially a trickle of local reporters, soon became a torrent, their vans clogging the narrow streets, their cameras flashing like predatory eyes. The story of the vanished twins, two identical innocent faces, captivated the nation. National news anchors delivered somber reports, their voices tinged with a familiar, tragic cadence, as they showed grainy photographs of the girls, appealing for any information. The Millers found themselves thrust into a spotlight they never wanted, their grief laid bare for the world to scrutinize. As weeks turned into a month, the search teams dwindled, their hope replaced by exhaustion. The town of Willow Creek, once a picture of rural tranquility, now carried a palpable weight of sorrow and unanswered questions. The laughter of children playing in the streets seemed muted, a somber undertone pervading even the brightest days. A shadow had fallen over Willow Creek, a permanent stain on its idyllic facade, a constant reminder of the two bright sparks that had been extinguished too soon. Sheriff Brody, a man who prided himself on solving every case, felt the gnawing frustration of a dead end. He knew, deep in his gut, that this was not a simple runaway case. Children, especially identical twins, did not just disappear into thin air. The unsettling silence, the complete lack of any trace, suggested something far more sinister. The case, already cold, was about to enter a long, desolate winter, its only constant the burning questions in the hearts of Sarah and Emily's parents. 27 years later, the The summer of 2022 cast its familiar heat over Willow Creek. The town still bore the faint scars of a tragedy that time had refused to fully heal. The Miller house, once vibrant with the sounds of a growing family, now stood quiet, almost a museum of grief. Mary Beth, her hair now streaked with silver, spent her days tending a small memorial garden in the backyard, her fingers tracing the engraved names of her daughters on a weathered stone, a testament to a hope that refused to die, even after decades of silence. Thomas, his frame stooped with the weight of years and sorrow, still lived in the house, though much of his time was spent in the dusty confines of his workshop. The rhythmic rasp of sandpaper on wood, a poor substitute for the laughter that once filled their home. He rarely spoke of the twins, his grief a private, deeply etched landscape within him. But his eyes held a perpetual sadness that spoke volumes. The scent of sawdust and old lumber was a constant companion, a stark contrast to the honeysuckle of that fateful summer. The case of the vanished Miller twins had long since been relegated to the cold case files, a thick dossier gathering dust. In the back room of the Willow Creek Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Brody, now retired, occasionally visited the office, his gaze lingering on the faded crime scene photos, a ghost of a frown on his brow. The new sheriff, a younger, ambitious woman named Eleanor Vance, had inherited the burden of the unsolved mystery, its unsolved nature a constant whisper in the halls of justice, a challenge to her own sense of duty. The original investigation, extensive as it was, had hit brick walls at every turn. No ransom notes, no witnesses, no physical evidence that could point to an abductor. Theories had come and gone like fleeting shadows, a drifter passing through town, a vengeful acquaintance, a random act of violence. Each theory had been pursued with a brief flurry of renewed hope, only to fizzle out, leaving behind another layer of disappointment and unanswered questions for the devastated Miller family. That local folklore had woven itself around the disappearance, transforming it into a cautionary tale whispered among children on summer nights. The carnival, once a symbol of joyful escape, became tinged with an ominous aura, its annual return stirring up old anxieties and a sense of unease. Some even claimed to see the twins' ghostly figures skipping through the fairgrounds after dark, a chilling testament to the town's enduring trauma. Detective Miles Corbin, a young, keen-eyed investigator new to the department, had recently taken an interest in the Miller case. He found himself drawn to the sheer emptiness of the file, the lack of any discernible trace, a void that screamed for answers. He spent evenings poring over the yellowed reports, tracing the lines of old maps, trying to find a pattern, a mist, detail, a flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness of the unsolved. The stale smell of old paper and dust filled his small office. He often visited Sheriff Brody in his retirement, seeking wisdom and perspective. Brody, sipping coffee in his worn armchair, would recount the initial days of the search, the palpable fear, the raw desperation of the parents. It was like they were erased. Miles, he'd often say, his voice heavy with the memory, just gone, like a puff of smoke. The air in Brody's den was always thick with the scent of pipe, tobacco, and old books. Corbin felt the weight of that unresolved grief, the quiet suffering of the Millers. He understood that for them, the case was not a file but a gaping wound, a perpetual ache that defined their lives. He often imagined the terror the twins must have felt, the confusion, the sudden absence of the familiar world they knew. A thought that fueled his determination. Despite the passing of time, the passage of decades, the Millers never gave up hope. They still kept a light on in the girls' bedroom at night, a beacon in the darkness, a silent prayer that one day their little fireflies would find their way home. Their love, though tested by an unimaginable loss, remained an unyielding flame, a flicker against the encroaching shadows of despair. The house itself seemed to breathe with their enduring hope, every creak and groan a reminder of what was missing. And so, the Miller twins' disappearance remained a testament to the enduring power of an unresolved mystery, a cold case that continued to cast a long, chilling shadow over Willow Creek, waiting for a chance encounter, a sudden revelation, a single thread that could unravel decades of silence and finally bring answers to a family that had waited far too long. The universe, however, had a shocking discovery waiting in the wings, entirely unrelated to the diligent work of law enforcement, a discovery that would shatter the tranquility of a summer afternoon. The summer of 2022 was particularly hot and dry in the Appalachian foothills of West Virginia, just a few hundred miles south of Willow Creek. The air hung thick and humid, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Ethan Cole, a seasoned solo hiker with a passion for exploring remote trails, had set out on a multi-day trek through the Monongahela National Forest, seeking the solace of untamed wilderness and the challenge of uncharted paths. He savored the quiet solitude, the rhythmic crunch of his boots on the forest floor, and the occasional chirping of unseen birds. Ethan was a man of meticulous preparation, his backpack packed with precision, his route carefully planned using an old-fashioned paper map and compass. He preferred the raw, unfiltered experience of nature, far from the digital distractions of modern life. The scent of the forest, a blend of decaying leaves and fresh growth, was a balm to his urban-weary soul. He was an experienced outdoorsman, but even he knew the mountains could be unpredictable. On the third day of his journey, a sudden, intense thunderstorm descended upon the forest, transforming the dry trails into treacherous, muddy streams. The sky turned an ominous charcoal gray, the air crackling with an almost tangible electricity. Rain lashed down in sheets, blurring the ancient trees into indistinct silhouettes. The wind howled through the branches, a mournful lament that seemed to echo the very wilderness itself. Seeking shelter, Ethan veered off his planned route, his eyes scanning for any natural overhang or dense canopy that might offer protection. The visibility was reduced to mere feet, the thunder echoing like cannon fire through the valleys. He scrambled over slick rocks, his boots sinking into the saturated earth, the dampness seeping through his clothes. The metallic temps of ozone filled the air. He stumbled upon a narrow, overgrown gully, its entrance obscured by thick brambles and fallen logs. It wasn't an ideal shelter. The steep sides offered a semblance of protection from the relentless downpour. As he pushed through the dense undergrowth, his hand brushing against damp moss and rough bark, he noticed something peculiar partially buried in the mud at the base of a particularly large, ancient oak tree. It was a small, brightly colored object, half submerged in the swirling rainwater. Curiosity piqued, despite the driving rain and growing chill. Ethan knelt down, his fingers brushing aside wet leaves and soil, his breath hitched in his throat. What he uncovered was a child's worn, brightly patterned fabric shoe, its once vibrant colors now faded and stained with years of dirt and decay. A shiver, unrelated to the cold rain, ran down his spine. He was deep in a remote, rarely frequented part of the forest. Finding a child's shoe here was unsettling, to say the least. It felt impossibly small, a stark contrast to the vast, untamed wilderness surrounding him. The sudden silence of the forest, after the roaring thunder, felt even more profound. He continued to dig, his hands now working with a frenzied urgency, a growing sense of dread building in his gut. The mud was thick and clinging, resisting his efforts. Slowly, agonizingly, more details emerged from the earth. A small, tarnished metal locket, its intricate design barely discernible. And then, unmistakable, a small, skeletal hand. Ethan stumbled back, his heart hammering against his ribs, the implications of his discovery crashing down on him with the force of a tidal wave. The rain continued to fall, but he no longer noticed it. His eyes, wide with shock, stared at the grim tableau emerging from the earth. The faint scent of damp earth and decay filled his nostrils, a scent he would never forget. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that he had stumbled upon something profoundly tragic, something that whispered of a long-forgotten story, a silent plea from the past. The solitude he had sought in the wilderness had been shattered by a discovery that would reverberate far beyond the quiet confines of the forest, an echo that would awaken a decades-old nightmare. He quickly pulled out his satellite phone, fingers fumbling as he tried to dial for help, the urgency of the moment overriding his previous preference for disconnect. The discovery sent shockwaves far beyond the quiet confines of the Monongahela National Forest. Within hours, the remote gully became a hive of activity, a stark contrast to the tranquility Ethan Cole had sought. Forensic teams, dressed in sterile, white suits, moved with meticulous precision, their careful movements a silent testament to the gravity of the scene. The air, once filled with the scent of pine and damp earth, now carried the antiseptic tang of scientific equipment and the quiet murmurs of investigators. Sheriff Vance received the initial call with a jolt that went straight to her core. A child's remains, found deep in the West Virginia wilderness, potentially decades old. The geographical proximity to Willow Creek, though not immediate, was enough to send a cold ripple of recognition through her. Could it be? The lingering question of the Miller twins, a silent specter in her department, immediately surfaced in her mind. The skeletal remains were carefully exhumed, a painstaking process that took days. The small shoe, the locket, and other fragmented pieces of clothing were carefully catalogued and bagged as evidence. The forensic anthropologists worked tirelessly, their instruments glinting in the harsh light of their portable lamps, seeking clues in the very bones that had once held life. Every bone, every fragment, every microscopic trace of soil was scrutinized for any hidden information. Preliminary examinations revealed startling details. The remains were indeed those of a young girl, consistent with the age of Sarah or Emily Miller at the time of their disappearance. More chillingly, a second, smaller set of bones was discovered nearby, intricately intertwined with the first, suggesting a shared fate. The implications were shattering. The quiet professionalism of the forensic team couldn't mask the profound sadness that permeated the air. The tarnished locket, once a treasured trinket, underwent careful restoration. Under the gentle hand of a forensic artist, the intricate floral design slowly emerged, and then, with a gasp, a tiny faded photograph became visible inside. It was a picture of two smiling girls, their arms wrapped around each other, their identical faces beaming with youthful innocence. The image, though distorted by time and decay, was undeniably, heartbreakingly, the Miller twins. The news reached the Miller family in Willow Creek like a distant thunderclap, a seismic event that shook their long-held grief from its quiet dormancy. Mary Beth received the call, her hand trembling as she listened to Sheriff Vance's carefully chosen words. A profound silence descended upon their home, broken only by Mary Beth's soft, ragged sobs. After 27 years, the impossible had happened. The echo of laughter, long faded, now held a new, agonizing whisper. Thomas, when he heard, simply stood, frozen in the doorway of his workshop, the scent of wood shavings suddenly lost to him. His eyes, usually clouded with a distant sadness, now held a raw, primal grief, years of suppressed pain erupting to the surface. He dropped the piece of wood he was carving, letting it fall with a dull thud to the floor. The relief of knowing was instantly overshadowed by the unimaginable agony of confirmation. Sheriff Vance personally delivered the locket to the Millers. Mary Beth held it in her trembling hands, her fingers tracing the tiny, beloved faces within. A wave of memories, sharp and vivid, washed over her. The day she bought them those lockets, identical, just like her girls. The way they'd giggled as they put them on, promising to never take them off. The scent of their childhood room, a mix of lavender and bubblegum, seemed to fill the air around her. The scientific confirmation came swiftly. Dental records, though challenging due to the age of the remains, provided the definitive match. It was Sarah and Emily Miller. The quiet speculation in Willow Creek, the hushed theories and enduring hope, were now replaced by a profound and collective sorrow. The town mourned again, their hearts aching for the young lives stolen so long ago, and for the family who had carried the unbearable burden of uncertainty for so long. The remains, small and fragile, spoke volumes, whispering a silent, tragic tale across the decades. The locket, a tangible link to their past, provided a chilling testament to their identity. The journey of grief, for the Millers, had entered a new, painful chapter, trading the anguish of the unknown for the stark reality of loss. But with identification came a renewed purpose: to understand how they ended up in such a remote, desolate place, hundreds of miles from home. The whispers from the past demanded answers, and the hunt for a killer, long dormant, was about to be reignited with fierce determination. The identification of Sarah and Emily's remains ignited a new, fierce urgency in the cold case. Sheriff Vance, now with Detective Corbin at her side, found herself leading an investigation that spanned decades and crossed state lines. The immediate question, cold and stark, was how 10-year-old girls from rural Pennsylvania ended up buried hundreds of miles away in the remote wilderness of West Virginia. The geographic disparity was a glaring red flag, pointing to abduction and a sophisticated, or at least a highly deliberate, disposal of the bodies. The small gully in Monongahela National Forest was meticulously re-examined, this time with the specific intent of finding any clue, no matter how minute. that could link the victims to their killer or the method of their transportation. Every speck of soil was analyzed, every surrounding tree trunk scrutinized. Forensic botanists examined the flora, attempting to determine if any plant species present at the burial site were unique to Willow Creek or another location, providing a silent witness to their journey. The initial autopsy, performed by a team of highly experienced forensic pathologists, revealed the grim truth. Both girls had suffered fatal blunt force trauma to the head, suggesting a violent end. There was no evidence of sexual assault, a detail that, while offering a small measure of relief, did nothing to lessen the horror of their final moments. The exact time of death, within a narrow window around their disappearance, confirmed the immediate tragedy that had befallen them, with the cause of death established. The focus shifted to the who and the how. Detective Corbin, tireless in his pursuit, began poring over the original case files again, this time with a fresh perspective informed by the grim discovery. He meticulously re-interviewed everyone who had been questioned in 1995, seeking inconsistencies, forgotten details, or new insights that might have been overlooked in the initial chaos of the search. The smell of stale coffee and old documents became his constant companion. He retraced the original search efforts, noting the areas covered and those that might have been missed. He researched similar cases from the mid-90s, looking for patterns or modus operandi that might connect to the Miller twins' fate. The sheer volume of information, decades of reports and interviews, was daunting. But Corbin approached it with a relentless determination. Driven by the faces of Sarah and Emily in the Lockett Dot, the small, close-knit community of Willow Creek, having revisited their grief, now found themselves under the microscope again. Sheriff Vance and Detective Corbin spent weeks canvassing the town, revisiting old leads and exploring new possibilities. They spoke to elderly residents whose memories might have faded, but whose insights could be crucial. The general store, the local diner, the church, every place that held a memory of 1995 became a source of potential information. The scent of familiar local dishes now carried a subtle undertone of unease. One particular avenue of inquiry that gained renewed attention was the carnival itself. The traveling show, long gone and its personnel dispersed, presented a significant challenge. However, advancements in digital forensics and cold case databases allowed investigators to track down some of the original carnival workers, now decades older and scattered across the country. Each phone call, each long drive to a distant state, was a painstaking effort to piece together the fragmented past. The task was immense. Like sifting through sand for a single grain of gold, the passage of 27 years had blurred memories, erased witnesses, and allowed potential evidence to decay. But the discovery of the twins' remains had breathed new life into the dying embers of the case, transforming it from an unsolvable mystery into a tangible crime scene with real victims. The long road back to justice had just begun, a journey fraught with challenges, but fueled by an unwavering commitment to the memory of Sarah and Emily. As Detective Corbin delved deeper into the old carnival records, a name began to emerge with disturbing frequency: Silas Blackwood. Blackwood had been a maintenance worker for the carnival in 1995, a shadowy figure who rarely engaged with others, known for his reclusive nature and a perpetually grim demeanor. Several former carnival employees, now elderly and with clearer memories, vaguely recalled him, often describing him with a shudder or a quick change of subject. He was an anomaly in the generally jovial atmosphere of the carnival, a dark cloud in a brightly lit world. Corbin found that Blackwood had been interviewed briefly in 1995, dismissed as a potential suspect due to his lack of a criminal record and a seemingly solid alibi provided by another transient worker. However, that alibi now felt flimsy, conveniently vague, and lacked any verifiable details. The original detective, overwhelmed by the immediate chaos of the search, hadn't pressed hard enough. The scent of stale tobacco and cheap coffee from the old interview notes seemed to cling to the pages. Blackwood's employment records showed a sporadic work history before and after 1995, primarily in itinerant trades across various states, mirroring the traveling nature of the carnival. This made tracking him down a monumental task, but with the aid of national databases and insurgency cooperation, Corbin began to piece together his movements. The more he dug, the more unsettling the portrait of Silas Blackwood became. A background check revealed a pattern of minor offenses, petty theft, disturbing the peace, but nothing violent. However, a deeper dive into his past uncovered something more disturbing: a juvenile record for animal cruelty, a disturbing precursor to potential violence. The old reports, thin and faded, described a young Blackwood, isolated and exhibiting troubling behavior, a red flag that had been overlooked in the rush of the initial investigation. Corbin spoke to Sheriff Brody about Blackwood. Brody, initially hesitant, recalled the man's odd stillness, his almost unnerving quietness. He was always just there, Brody mused, staring out his window at the familiar Willow Creek landscape. Never really part of things, but always on the periphery. The memory of the man's blank stare, the lack of any discernible emotion, sent a chill down Brody's spine even now. The geographical link began to solidify. Blackwood's last known address, before disappearing from records entirely in the late 1990s, was a decrepit trailer park in rural West Virginia, not far from the Monongahela National Forest. The pieces, once scattered and seemingly unrelated, were beginning to fall into place, forming a terrifying mosaic. The scent of decaying wood and mold that often accompanied abandoned places suddenly became relevant. The theory began to take shape. Blackwood, a loner with a hidden propensity for violence, had somehow lured the twins away from the carnival, perhaps offering them a ride or a promise of something exciting. He then transported them, alive or deceased, to the remote gully in West Virginia, a place he knew well, a place that offered isolation and an opportunity for concealment. The sheer audacity of the crime, the cold calculated nature of the disposal, sent a shiver through Corbin. The absence of any witnesses or overt signs of a struggle at the carnival indicated a subtle, almost invisible abduction. Perhaps the twins, innocent and trusting, had simply walked away with someone they believed to be harmless, a figure from the carnival who was seemingly safe. The thought of their last moments, their innocent trust betrayed, was a gut realization for Corbin. The deeper Corbin delved into Blackwood's shadowy past, the more he felt an unsettling certainty. The man was a ghost, leaving barely a trace, but the few breadcrumbs he did leave pointed relentlessly towards him. The silence of the long cold case was breaking, replaced by the faint, chilling whispers of a killer's name, a name that had always been there, hidden in plain sight within the dusty files. The pursuit of Silas Blackwood became an obsession, a race against time to bring justice to the two little girls who had waited 27 years for their story to be told. Silas Blackwood, the enigmatic carnival worker, became the prime focus of the revived investigation, but Blackwood himself was a ghost, having vanished from all official records in the late 1990s. The challenge now was not just to prove his involvement, but to find him. Sheriff Vance authorized a full-scale manhunt, utilizing every available resource. Blackwood's last known address, the dilapidated trailer park in West Virginia, was the starting point. The scent of stagnant water and decaying structures hung heavy in the air around the abandoned property. The trailer, long abandoned, was a skeletal shell, picked clean by time and scavengers. There were no immediate clues, no forgotten notes, or personal effects. However, a meticulous forensic sweep of the area around the trailer yielded a promising lead: a discarded, corroded toolbox, half buried beneath a pile of rubble. Inside, among rusted wrenches and defunct tools, a single faded photograph was discovered, its edges frayed. The photograph showed Silas Blackwood, younger, his eyes still holding that unsettling blankness, standing next to a battered, dark-colored pickup truck. Though old and indistinct, immediately caught Corbin's attention. It was the same make and model as a vehicle reported by a few distant witnesses near the Willow Creek Carnival in 1995, a detail that had been dismissed as irrelevant at the time. The faint smell of rust and old oil clung to the image. Further investigation into the truck's make and model, cross-referenced with DMV records from the mid-90s in West Virginia, led to a breakthrough. The vehicle had been registered to a distant relative of Silas Blackwood, a reclusive aunt who had since passed away. She had reported it stolen shortly after Blackwood disappeared. This detail, previously unconnected, now painted a chilling picture. Blackwood had stolen a vehicle, likely to facilitate the abduction and transport of the twins. The theory gained further traction when a retired West Virginia state trooper, now living in a nursing home, was re-interviewed. He vividly recalled a routine traffic stop involving a dark-colored pickup truck on a deserted stretch of highway. just a few days after the Miller twins vanished. The driver, a disheveled man matching Blackwood's description, had been agitated and evasive. The trooper, focused on a minor infraction, had let him go, a decision that haunted him now. The faint smell of antiseptic and old linen filled the air of the nursing home. The case was moving at a rapid pace, decades of silence suddenly yielding to a flurry of activity. News of the renewed investigation and the naming of a prime suspect sent a ripple of fresh fear through the communities where Blackwood had worked or resided. People who had long forgotten him, or tried to, now remembered his unsettling presence, his detached gaze. The collective memory of Blackwood began to coalesce, forming a more complete and terrifying picture. The Millers, though still reeling from the confirmation of their daughters' deaths, found a grim sense of purpose in the pursuit of justice. Mary Beth, despite her frail health, insisted on meeting with Sheriff Vance and Detective Corbin regularly, offering her memories, no matter how painful, of the days leading up to the disappearance. She described her daughters' trust, their innocence, the very qualities that might have made them vulnerable. The scent of her garden, a mix of roses and lavender, now seemed tinged with a new, stronger resolve. With a probable cause established and a clear direction, the focus shifted to finding Silas Blackwood. He was now a high-priority fugitive, his old life a mere shadow, now illuminated by the tragedy he had left in his wake. Law enforcement agencies across the country were alerted, and a profile of Blackwood, including his known haunts and behavioral patterns, was widely distributed. The ghost of a suspect was beginning to take form, his outlines sharper, more defined. The passage of time, while having erased some evidence, had also allowed for new forensic techniques and a more connected, collaborative law enforcement network. The hunt for Silas Blackwood, a man who had successfully hidden in the shadows for nearly 3 decades, was now on the long journey to uncover the truth of Sarah and Emily's last moments, was nearing its terrifying conclusion. But first, they had to catch their ghost. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a series of anonymous tips received by the Willow Creek Sheriff's Department. The tips, meticulously analyzed by Detective Corbin, pointed to a small, isolated cabin deep in the wilderness of northern Maine, a place rumored to be a haven for off-grid survivalists and those seeking to disappear. The tips were vague but consistent, describing an older man fitting Blackwood's description, living alone, rarely venturing into town. The biting cold of the Maine winter, even in early summer, seemed to add to the starkness of the reports. A covert surveillance operation was immediately launched. FBI agents, working in conjunction with local Maine State Police, established a perimeter around the cabin. The scent of pine and wood smoke hung heavy in the crisp northern air, a stark contrast to the humid Pennsylvania summer where the nightmare began. For days, they observed, waiting for the opportune moment, a chance to apprehend a man who had eluded justice for so long. On a cold, drizzly morning, Silas Blackwood emerged from the cabin, carrying a bucket to a well. He was older, his hair thinner and grayer, his face more gaunt, but the cold, emotionless eyes were unmistakable. The arrest was swift and decisive, a culmination of decades of silent pursuit. Blackwood offered no resistance, his silence as unnerving as his past. The metallic click of the handcuffs seemed to echo through the desolate forest. Back in custody, transported to a secure facility, Blackwood initially remained stonewalled, refusing to speak, his gaze distant and unyielding. Sheriff Vance and Detective Corbin, having flown to Maine, took turns in the interrogation room. Employing a combination of psychological tactics and undeniable evidence, they laid out the timeline, the forensic findings, the rediscovered photograph, the stolen truck, and the haunting image of the locket. The air in the interrogation room was thick with unspoken tension and the faint smell of stale coffee. It was the locket that finally broke him. When Vance placed the small, tarnished locket on the table, the faded image of Sarah and Emily smiling out, something flickered in Blackwood's eyes, a fleeting moment of something akin to recognition, or perhaps a sliver of remorse. His facade crumbled, slowly at first, then with a torrent of detached, chilling admissions. The scent of cleaning solution in the room suddenly felt cloying. He spoke in a low, monotone voice, recounting the events of that fateful day in 1995. With a chilling lack of emotion, he had seen the twins at the carnival, their innocence and vulnerability a perverse magnet for his dark impulses. He had lured them away with the promise of a hidden arcade game, a place away from the crowds. He admitted to killing them, striking them with a rock in a secluded area of the woods near the carnival, their laughter replaced by a terrifying silence. He described the painstaking journey to West Virginia, the twins' small bodies hidden in the back of the stolen pickup truck, his meticulous efforts to conceal them, choosing the remote gully because he had worked on a logging crew in that area years prior and knew its desolate nature. He recalled burying them with a chilling detachment, covering his tracks, believing he had truly vanished, leaving no trace. The details were gruesome, the words delivered without a hint of emotion, a stark testament to the darkness within him. Confession, recorded and transcribed, was a horrifying testament to the depth of human depravity and the resilience of a cold case. It answered the how and the who, but the why remained elusive, lost in the twisted logic of a disturbed mind. Blackwood never offered a motive, never expressed regret, simply stating the facts with a chilling precision. The scent of fear and resignation filled the small interrogation room. For the Millers, the confession brought a brutal, painful form of closure. The truth, however horrific, finally laid bare the fate of their beloved daughters. The silence of 27 years had been broken, replaced by the chilling narrative of their last moments. The hunt for justice, so long delayed, was finally nearing its end, but the raw, unvarnished truth was a heavy burden, a new chapter in their unending grief. The trial of Silas Blackwood was a national spectacle, drawing media attention from every corner of the country. The grim details of his confession, the haunting image of the locket, and the decades of suffering endured by the Miller family captivated the public. The courtroom in West Virginia was packed daily, a silent testament to the enduring human fascination with true crime and the pursuit of justice. The air was thick with anticipation and the hushed murmurs of the crowd. Mary Beth and Thomas Miller, their faces etched with the profound sorrow of decades, sat in the front row, their presence a silent, powerful reminder of the two innocent lives stolen. They listened with an agonizing fortitude as the evidence was presented, the forensic reports confirming the blunt force trauma, Blackwood's chilling confession played for the jury, and the meticulous recreation of the crime scene. Each piece of evidence, each word spoken, was a fresh wound, but they endured it for Sarah and Emily. The scent of courtroom wood and stale air seemed to cling to them. Sheriff Vance and Detective Corbin, their professional demeanor masking the emotional toll the case had taken, testified with precision and clarity. Corbin, in particular, presented a compelling narrative of how the cold case had been reignited, detailing the painstaking process of tracking Blackwood and the critical role of Ethan Cole's discovery. His voice, steady and calm, belied the immense effort and dedication that had gone into unraveling the decades-old mystery. Blackwood, seated at the defense table, remained largely impassive, his eyes betraying little emotion. His defense team attempted to argue for mental instability, but his lucid, detailed confession and the meticulous planning of the crime undercut their claims. He offered no testimony, no apology, remaining a silent, unsettling presence throughout the proceedings. The only sound from him was an occasional shuffle of his feet. The prosecution painted a stark picture of a premeditated, cold-blooded crime, emphasizing the vulnerability of the young victims and the calculated nature of Blackwood's actions. They argued that Blackwood had taken advantage of the carnival's chaotic environment, the fleeting nature of its visitors, and the trust of two innocent children. The prosecutor's voice, resonant and clear, filled the courtroom. After days of harrowing testimony, the jury deliberated for only a few hours. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. A collective gasp, followed by a quiet, communal sigh of relief, rippled through the courtroom. Mary Beth closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, a tear of sorrow, but also of a long-awaited, painful vindication. Thomas simply squeezed her hand, his gaze fixed on Blackwood, a silent acknowledgement of the justice delivered. Silas Blackwood was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the remainder of his life incarcerated. As he was led away, his face remained emotionless, an empty vessel, forever haunted by the echoes of 2 little girls' stolen laughter. The clanging of the jail cell doors was a final, chilling punctuation mark on a horrific saga. Back in Willow Creek, the town slowly began to heal. The Miller Memorial Garden, once a place of quiet grief, became a symbol of enduring love and the triumph of justice. The community, bound by shared sorrow, rallied around Mary Beth and Thomas, offering support and solace. The scent of honeysuckle still bloomed on the porch swing, but now it carried a different, more somber meaning, a reminder of what was lost. Asterisk, the story of Sarah and Emily Miller became a cautionary tale, a testament to the shadows that can lurk even in the brightest of days. But it was also a story of resilience, of unwavering parental love, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The echoes of justice, though decades delayed, finally brought a measure of peace to the Miller family, allowing them to finally lay their little fireflies to rest, their spirits now free from the long, agonizing uncertainty, finally able to find their peace. The enduring memory of their laughter would forever resonate in the heart of Willow Creek, a quiet, poignant reminder of lives lived and a tragic ending that finally found its resolution.